Satu. As the government team, we see that the problem that happened in the status quo, that feminist movement are not having such a general goals to be achieved at the very first beginning. How the importance of forwarding universal cause, it's really important that I will explain in my argument that why it is in line with the problem that happened in the status quo, in the current status quo, that how the feminist movement are being so radical to achieve certain of things that they couldn't achieve at the end of the day, because they have no any kinds of general goals to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. Before that, explanations about what is actually we mean by universal means that there would be acceptable in the terms of moral norms and law in the universal level, such as how the women should fulfill their education, avoid sexual assault, maternity leave, and participation in politics, and etc. All these things is different with all the most marginalized group of women that what we are currently face as a feminist movement, right? On how what happened in the status quo, like feminist movement are focusing into solve the problem such in the intersection of community that differentiate the characteristic of women, such as women of color, women in a high class or low class, and so on and so forth. Thus, our stance is really clear that we want to all women could be campaign as a whole, because the problem that we face, we need a communal support, and that's why we need these kinds of forwarding a universal cause, because at the end of the day it could lead in a communal support, and so on and so forth. And so my second speaker would explain about why in our side it would create a better political discourse, and it could empower women at the end of the day. Two points in my arguments. First is that why prioritizing forwarding a universal cause in line with the interests of feminist movement, and secondly, how in the process of forwarding universal cause could create effectivity in terms of how we empower women at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So first thing, we have to explain why universal cause is really important to feminist movement, right? We say that this kinds of thing is really important because why? Because this is something that gives a direct impact to all the women, ladies and gentlemen. We say that the primary needs that all these kinds of women needs, it only exists by using these kinds of universal cause, ladies and gentlemen, such as how you fulfill your education, for example. It's really depend on how the women should embrace one another and should be in a communal level, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, we say that this is something that could become barriers to all the women to achieve another goals that what the opposition might say in this debate, ladies and gentlemen. Example, they want to achieve the diversity of women, for example. You cannot achieve that things if you always become the victim of rape, for example, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we say that this is really important in order to generalize what is exactly your demand as a woman, ladies and gentlemen. And also, the problem that happened with the feminist movement right now, using way of forwarding marginalized group, sometimes look like it a form of polarize the woman itself, ladies and gentlemen. So what kinds of polarization that happen in our side? The process or the ideal word in the opposition might be like this kinds of feminist movement would eventually see this kinds of marginalized group is something that we have to distinguish one another, ladies and gentlemen. That it shows you how the attention would be divided in their side of the house, ladies and gentlemen. So the feminist movement would create a level of priority that should be focused on the certain issues that we think it's really harmful at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Example, if the problem in status quo in specific area, for example, that you want to protect black women, we don't say it is bad, but we couldn't deny the fact that we are also face a lot of problem in state of black women, for example. But even if the opposition might say that this is important because all the feminist movement is different in the different countries, different area, and different region, for example, we say that status quo alternative is already enough, ladies and gentlemen. Example, if your problem is about the color, then we already have a community that support diversity, for example. If your problem is about women that also LGBT, that we have LGBT community, ladies and gentlemen. These kinds of alternatives should we embrace at the very first beginning in order to make these kinds of feminist movement could be effective in the future. But also, the problem that happened in the status quo, there are lots of feminist movement that identifying as a radical movement, ladies and gentlemen, in which this is unstrategic to begin with to achieve the goals of feminists to embrace each other, ladies and gentlemen. In our worst scenario, it might take a long time process that you could be accept and you could empower yourself. But we say that that is okay, because in the opposition side of the house, what happened in the status quo, just like the progress that would happen, just like what happened in the status quo, ladies and gentlemen, there are lots of limitation for women to enter any kind to get any access to enter in politics or parliament, for example, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we need these kinds of way in order to easier and to be friendly towards the women itself and towards the government to accept these kinds of pressure at the end of the day. Second argument, how in the process of forwarding universal cause it could create effectivity in terms of how we empower women. Ladies and gentlemen, we say that forwarding universal cause could set the standard of what is actually your identity as feminist movement, or what is exactly the core value that of these kinds of feminist movement, ladies and gentlemen. As I explained before, the approach that happened in the status quo is so radical, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we need such a priority to set the standard of what is exactly the primary needs of these kinds of women, ladies and gentlemen. Especially when we are talking about women that lives in rural area. Their basic needs is exactly about education, ladies and gentlemen. But it's not limited to people that, women that lives in rural areas, but also all the women that stay even in the city, for example, ladies and gentlemen. Education is something that you need as a whole, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we say that in order for you to achieve another goals and achieve another better level of life, you also have to fulfill these kinds of basic needs at the very first beginning, ladies and gentlemen. But even if in our worst scenario, that we might lose our support from the society because we generalize the women at the very first beginning, we say that it's not going to happen in our side, ladies and gentlemen, because as I said before, the community that could cater these kinds of women, for example, already exists. But even if it's going to happen, we say that is okay. At least our main goals in our side, it's better rather than the opposition side of the house, ladies and gentlemen. Because in the opposition side of the house, they might focus in the marginalized group, but they don't understand what is exactly the core problem of these kinds of feminist movement currently face, ladies and gentlemen. This is important to analyze the situations of these kinds of feminist movement in order to achieve their goals, to empower the women, ladies and gentlemen. So what I already proved to you in this debate, we already proved to you how by prioritizing forwarding universal cause is in line with the interests of feminist movement in general, ladies and gentlemen. We don't say that the problem that feminist movement face currently is not that really problematic, but we say that how the strategy of you want to empower women is really important to unify one another, ladies and gentlemen, because these kinds of communal support could be supporting system to these women at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we say that in order for you to empower women, we're proud to propose.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I jump into my substantive material, I have some responses towards the government side of the house. They say that the feminist movement is radical because they don't have standard or specific goal that they want to achieve. Ladies and gentlemen, in our side, there will be standard and specific goals that will be applied for For example, we want to focus on marginalized group of women, so this feminist movement will no longer be seen as a radical movement, ladies and gentlemen. And I will extend later in my substantive material. And also, they stated that the status quo is already progressive. For example, there's a movement that can protect black women, that can protect lesbians, and so on and so forth. But in the status quo right now, there's still a lot of discrimination. There's still a lot of discriminations going on towards these black women, towards lesbians being attacked in a bus, for example, and so on and so forth. So we say that this kind of mini movement that brought by Neny is not enough. So moving on. In here, we believe that feminist movement, we want equality in all women. we want equality in all women, right? But to achieve the equality in all that women, we want to focus more on the marginalized women, so that the equality women can be achieved. To achieve that, two mechanisms that will be brought by the oppositions, which is first, first we want to achieve protections for marginalized group of women by first with direct funding or fund allocations to marginalized women. And second of all is campaigning how suffer marginalized women are. So how suffer marginalized women are. And also by this by campaigning that we believe that it will lead to better approach to the parliaments to really see how suffer these women are and how much they need help. Moving on, why we should prioritize marginalized women. These people, we believe that these people need help the most. They are poor, they are not privileged, they have less alternative, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that in this status quo right now, it is more human to take care. It is more human for the feminist movement to take care about this unprivileged woman first, then do campaign in streets, for example, for fighting for women participations in parliament, which is actually already happened in the status quo. So and also why in the status quo feminist movement is lack of public support, because they don't have any standard, they don't have any specific goal. The problem is too general, and there is no and most of the society do not know what actually feminist movement want. Through this proposal, there is finally a standard or specific goals that society will know, and by this society will help, because they see how suffer these women, and of course the society will help. How by doing this we could get public support? First, as I explained, we want to campaign how suffer these marginalized women are more. We believe that are more than enough to get public attentions, and this will be effective because society will tend to help people, those who really need their help, ladies and gentlemen. How important is public support? So the problem can be achieved easily, because many people really contributive to help the feminist movement. It's different in the government side of the house, where actually specific goals do not stand in their proposal, ladies and gentlemen. So we have proven to you why it is better for feminists to prioritize the marginalized group of women, and we have explained to you how public support can be achieved in our proposal, and also why the image of the feminist movement will be seen as a good movement, because we help those who really need the help first, and so on and so forth. Lastly, if this is successful, the future implication is that this marginalized movement will be more contributive towards feminist movement, ladies and gentlemen, because this marginalized movement see that their movement is actually fighting for their rights, is actually help them, and by that they will be more contributive towards their feminist agenda, ladies and gentlemen. Based on these reasons, we're proud to oppose.
Panels, through clarification in my speech. First, though the fight of feminists took a long time to succeed, but we as the opposition side of the house, we believe that it is more faster and it is more effective if we are going to forwarding universal cause, both in the parliament and also to spreading our narrative towards the society. Second clarification, what do Nenys mean by radical status quo is mean that sometimes you are being radical because you came from marginalized groups. Means you are more vocal using your background as your justification in doing so. Because you think that you are very marginalized individual, that you are consistently being oppressed, thus you are doing it as the justification. But as the opposition side of the house, we say it is not strategic for a feminist movement to say that it is the core movement that you want to give. Why? I will explain to you later according to why politically and why socially it is not true. Before I'm jumping to explain to you that, two rebuttals. First, that governments of the house claim that they want to force the government to give funding to certain marginalized group, they want to give better protection, and etc. Thus, the reason why they cannot stand this argument to this debate, because first, they fail to characterize why feminists inherently fight for their specific marginalized identity. Since, as the feminist movement, you just want to fight to certain act of violence or a certain act of criminal activity or certain act of harassment that specifically directed to empower women. And the benefit of you being in a marginalized society, or you are women in a marginalized society, is the impact of the fight of the feminist movement if you want to fight to certain issues. Notice that being specific minority or having a minority identity inside the status quo means you are also have your particular groups with all your particular campaign, with all your bargaining positions in the government. Thus, you should explain to me, to us, why it is directly the job of feminist movement to directly force the government to do so. No explanations. But second reasoning about the protections, why the protection in their side cannot be achievable, we believe because they don't explain to us clearly why in the process of discussion in the parliament, the outcome of it is directly to give the people, the women or the marginalized women, specifically the protections, if you are glamorizing the differentiation of identity inside the parliament discussion. We're going to say to you that it will create more support inside the parliament, and why the outcome of it is also directly touch the marginalized society. We're going to prove you that. Neny's prove you two things. First, Neny is already proved you why it is in line with the concept of feminist movement, why you should stick with the general or universal cause of you fighting for the issues of women. Second of all, why it can directly embrace women. I'm going to prove you this. First, why in the end of the day, the opposition campaign narrative would regress feminist discourse in policy-making process. Second of all, how using intersectional narrative would regress the fight of the feminist movement horizontally, means the people to people. Here's my first argument. Why it will regress the discussion inside a particular parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, in status quo, we say that our fight is less focused in spreading our value. The reason of this, because the content of the campaign is already having a various focus, because we are focusing on intersectionality. We focus for Muslim feminists, we also focus to black feminists, means we are sporadically sharing a narrative on how the ideal fight for women should be. This is giving damage towards the discussion inside the parliament, because first reason, because inside of the parliament, the vast majority of the parliament wants to hear that what is the red line of the policy making process. Thus, it will cater all the people and the grassroots society if you want to protect them, ladies and gentlemen. This would lead to the policy making process, or the parliament instead of that is less siding to women friendly policy, because the people will inside the parliament will think that two things. First, it is not relevant, it is the only specific issues of the minority. Second, mostly the people inside the particular parliament is already a privilege. Maybe they are think that women issue is a very important issue, but they don't think the black people issue, the people of color issue or Muslim issue is a very important thing inside the parliament. Thus, they also should explain to us why, if you are brought up consistently this particular issue inside the parliament, you will constantly and specifically hear them and change your policy because of that intersectionality or based on that particular issues. We say those particular intersectionality is not effective. But second problem inside of these issues, because you are fighting intersectionality, means every intersection inside the feminist movement would only support those who are upholding those particular marginalized identity. For example, like if I am black, I would only support black female black female politicians, for example. If I am Latin, I will support AOC, for example. Why this is hard? Because every people will have their own fight based on their marginalized identity, and their voices inside the parliament is also it is also break up. The reason why this is possible, because they have an initial fight for them to fight for their identity first, then they want to fight under the umbrella of feminism. This is also possible because they are having more oppression inside. They are having more oppression in regards to their identity, rather than they have more oppression inside the particular identity as women, ladies and gentlemen. Thus, also the second reason, the pressure that giving to this particular politician is heavily based on their identity, not based on their particular identity as a woman. Thus, it would also make hard for those particular people to exercise the women's policy. But comparatively in our side, two benefits. First, using universal cause narrative would making policy making process easier. It is also because we're sending the narrative that it is also the problem of privileged people. It is also the problem of white people. It is also the problem of all the people. Thus, changing this particular policy to making the policy women friendly is more easier. But second of all, moreover, we are taking more effective approaches, because the result of making those policy, if we are making a policy that is women friendly, the one who take the benefit is also women in marginalized identity. The reason why? Because the policy is also general. The policy about child rearing, how important to be acknowledging a child rearing, for example, how important to eliminate the sexual harassment in the office, for example. Those particular policy is a policy that is also friendly towards those in marginalized identity. Thus, they should explain to us why those particular benefit, if those policies is already passed, is not directly targeted also to the marginalized community, and what is their alternative if they claim they have more alternative. Second argument, how using intersectional narrative will regress the fight of the feminist movement horizontally, people to people. First, ladies and gentlemen, it is intuitive that they should fight or embrace all women. The problem with campaigning in their side is, first, people most likely would not care because they are only fighting to the identity which I am not related to. The vast majority of the society, let's say white people, cannot realize what is the oppression that felt by the black people, for example. Muslim people in Indonesia most likely won't relate to the LGBT oppression in Indonesia, ladies and gentlemen. But second of all, the reason why people don't give public support, like what Chesa said, two reasons. Because they feel because the level of irritability is high. Second of all, because maybe they have a backlashing value. I, as a Muslim people, wouldn't support the feminist movement to support an LGBT just because in the same umbrella of women oppression. It is more intuitive because as a Muslim, I will prioritize my identity to fight LGBT rather than I want to support the women's value. That is intuitive to say that our proposal is better to prove to you that our fight should be universal. We are proof to you that, and we are taking this debate. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, understand that everyone in this world faces a different problem. Understand that every single woman in this world faces a different problem, whether it is based on their where they live, for example, whether it is based on how their skin look like, for example. Every single thing that they face is different. That is why the solution of the problem that they face as a woman is different, ladies and gentlemen. So for example, if you are a hijabers, for example, you live in Indonesia, you will not face those particular problem that the society hate you, because you are live in the place that everyone there also are hijabers, for example. But when you move to USA, when you are a hijaber and you live in USA, people will see you as something different. People will see you as something that is not part of them. Hence why the possibility for you to get, for example, get bullied and so on and so forth will be higher compared with the people in Indonesia. So that is exactly what is the reason why I say that everyone face a different problem and face a different problem. And also the government side of the house was arguing that with their proposal that they are using the universal cause, it could affect all women. Okay, we say no, ladies and gentlemen. There is a different problem that they face. I already explained to you about that. For example, their different color. For example, in USA, when you are a black woman, people will see you as something different. People will treat you a different way when you are a white woman. So that is why the problem that those particular black women face is really different with the problem that those white women face, ladies and gentlemen. And also, they give us an example about rape, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I will give you an explanation that actually rape only happened to a few kind of women. For example, a woman in a low class, for example, and also a woman that work as an actress, for example. It create a bigger possibility for them to get raped because they live because they work at those particular community that could create those particular conditions. Compared with those particular people out of those particular community, they didn't face the same problem. That is why exactly those particular rape only happen to a few kind of people. That's why we couldn't generalize them, ladies and gentlemen, because they have a different problem that they face. Okay, and they also say that the status quo already enough. For example, for LGBT community, for lesbian women, they already have LGBT community to help them. But we say no, those particular LGBT community didn't enough to help them. Why? Because for example, in Indonesia, we have a different perspective how we see LGBT community and how we see feminists. That is why no matter what those particular LGBT say, we as Indonesian will not hear them because we see that those particular LGBT community as something bad compared to the feminist movement. Indonesia see those particular feminist movement as something that is better compared with LGBT community. That is why those feminist movement is something that is less tend to be more likely a better way for these women to improve their right through being lesbian, for example. People in every country already aware of this movement. People already progressive. People already see that feminist movement is something good. That is why when this feminist movement tell them something, for example, a lesbian could be justified, people will see that as a good things. People will see that as a good thing compared when LGBT community a campaign about that, people will not see that as a good thing because they had those LGBT community, ladies and gentlemen. And also, the government side of the house was arguing that minorities problem in parliament is not important, but we say exactly that is why we need to help them. We need to share awareness to help those particular minority, because we see that in parliament they are not counted as something that is important. We see that no one think that they are important. That is why we should create the awareness of the society that they are also important. They are also part of us. And how we could create that is that for example, the main reason why exactly people will not help a universal cause, because they see that that is something normal, that is something usual. We also face that problem. For example, in a general problem like women couldn't work, for example, like women should stay in home, for example. People already normalize that. People already see that as something normal. So this is why when we share those awareness about those universal problem, society will not see that see that as something important, because they feel like I also feel that and I'm still okay. So that is something that is that actually not important to be talking about, compared when we take a case about, for example, a child marriage in some place, marriage in some place, people will shock about that. People will say that, oh, that is something that I never hear. So I think that is this is something that different. This is something that I should be aware of, because no one care about this. By saying this, meaning that it will create more attention from the people. Hence why the public, the society will, the public support will be created, and also with a good campaign and etc., it will raise more awareness, and with that it will the funding and so on and so forth will go to those particular marginalized people. And we say that those marginalized people are the one who need this funding the most, because we see that those universal problems, so on and so forth, there are already a lot of people that care of that problem. There are already a lot of people that aware of those particular problems. There are already a lot of people that share their money to those particular problems. That's why, compared to the marginalized people, people are not aware of those particular things. That's why those for example, funding and so on and so forth should goes to those marginalized people. Okay, vote for opposition.
We understand that in status quo we have the most vulnerable society, the most vulnerable women. We understand in status quo that we have different problems, but it's not the only thing that we should consider in today's debate. As feminist movement, we also have to consider which approach or which cause that will have the relatability of all women, and we can get the communal support, because that's the basic things that we have to do in terms of having the approach towards political movement, and also the political discussion that will also be ideal, and the policy that will enforced inside of in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why, even if we believe that women are also have the particular differences and particular problem, that's not the only thing that you have to consider as feminist movement in the end of the day. So first, let's engage towards the problem differences and how it will cater the layers. We told you, ladies and gentlemen, that yes, they have the differences, but we have already told you that in status quo we have the movement that also support the race. We have the movement who also support the LGBT movement, the Muslims, etc., etc., ladies and gentlemen. That is why we say in status quo we have them all, but they say it's not enough. But the problem is that they also have to prove to you that why it is the burden of feminist movement to begin with to support them internally and to support them into the layers of the identity that they have, ladies and gentlemen. Because to begin with, being lesbian isn't what feminists propose inside of status quo to begin with, right? But equality of chance inside of the job field, for example, and etc., ladies and gentlemen. So we believe that it's not the thing that feminist movement want to begin with. But why inside of their side of the house, if feminist movement support this vulnerable society and be inside of their side, this approach will also be easily accepted inside of our house in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Because if we acknowledge that women are all suffering, if we make this approach, we believe that people also will acknowledge that they are the minority. The people will also acknowledge that women have the problem, and etc., ladies and gentlemen. So that is why we should also talk about the effectivity of how feminist movement can be feasible inside of our status quo to champion their ideas, and etc., ladies and gentlemen. That is why we told you that actually this universal cause is the bridge of the more specific cause that we told you is is also important, because we believe that if you approach is towards their vulnerability, it's not something that people directly relate into, or people can accept that that's exactly a problem, and that's why it's not a strategic move and effective move if feminist movement wants is that the political discussion ideal and also another etc. But second, let's talk about the protection and the support that they told you in today's debate, right? They told you that they are the most vulnerable, and that is why they need protection. We told you that status quo is enough, movement exists. But ladies and gentlemen, we told you that inside of their house, it is hard to gain the protection anyway when you have polarized movement and you are not united in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. First we told you that most likely they will they will protect you is people who feel that your problem is severe or your status is that vulnerable. When your campaign narrative is lesbian woman is at stake, the campaign will only be relatable towards that group or to towards that group only, which is less in community and in number, and it is hard to be universally accepted, and there is a clash internally inside the feminist movement in the end of the day, because because it's not all people that feel relatable towards that problem, ladies and gentlemen. Thus, less support in number means hard to push for the protection. But second of all, you will also hardly get general people support, because in status quo, feminist movement acceptance is already very hard, because you challenge the social structure and the social construction that we have. You push when you push for in times you push for something against their basic belief of religion, like how Haykal already told you, will also be harder in times of status quo if you want the protection for them, the vulnerable people, right? But even on the black feminist community too, right, it is still hard to, for example, if you want the protection, because in status quo, the reason why white feminists versus black feminists is at clash, because the whites claim that the feminist movement is focusing too much on the black feminists because they are vulnerable, which they claim that somehow giving less contribution towards the fight of feminist movement in times of the political movement and the policy making process, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why I believe to you that if your approach is on general that women are hardly accepted, then it will be more friendly and more accepted towards the community internally. But notice that the general society of women would support something that they feel relatable or they feel important to be championed. Make it specific just to marginalize people. Internally, you cannot be unite and champion each other, means internally you are weak. And this is something that is very harmful for feminist movement, right? And because you need to be appealing to general society, that you have to show that first you have the friendly approach, and second you have the established internal community that have the strong movement and also have strong communal support internally, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why we believe to you, if you are challenging this vulnerable society to only become your campaign narrative, you will not be appealing internally, and you also will not be appealing generally, and you will have the less support, and the protection that you want will no longer achieve inside of your house. But how protection can be achieved inside of our house, right? This is when Haykal's argument is very important. I mean, when general approach means people will automatically feel that your problem is mine. Generality means you can easily understand the problem and what the fight is, not unlike what Chesa said to you, right? When you make the problem general, means you make the capability of people to understand it is better, and that is so you make people can feel the problem is true, and you can make the people feel that this is the problem of us and this is the problem that we should champion instead of status quo. In opposition, maybe you have the protection from your peer or your community that supports you, but on ground only, ladies and gentlemen, this on ground support to protect you means nothing, because you only be protected by your community, but not on political level, ladies and gentlemen. That is why Haykal's argument is very important, because he told you if your approach is friendly and you have the internal established support from your community, you can have a more united political movement, for example. Like, for example, the political campaign will not be different, or the voices will not be polarized. For example, in status quo, you have a black women politician, and you have a Muslim politician to be championed. You will be polarized because you would most likely choose them based on their identity of Muslim or women, or Muslim or lesbian or black, ladies and gentlemen. You will never care about what women idea that they would like to champion in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. This is problematic, because in terms of feminist movement, if you want to have a powerful voice inside of parliament, you have to make a unite voices in the end of the day, and you have to make these voices of these women should be focused towards one candidate only, for example. And discussion upon what you have to champion inside of status quo that is problematic upon women should only be discussed in a focused manner, not on whether they are black or whether they are Muslim in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. But even if in the end of the day that within this kinds of support or the way of us approaching instead of status quo, we will lose the support and we cannot get the protection in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. We told you that even if inside of opposition they will get the protection, their fight for their own identity is not something for women in general. It's something that is very unfair for feminist movement to begin with, because we believe to begin with, feminist movement exists to support all women and not the intersections of women that exists in status quo. We told you also, even if they get the protection, the intention inside of feminist movement will also be increased, because the feminists inside of them will challenge that you are creating a hierarchy and a level of to which vulnerability that you deem necessary and important, that you should prioritize it in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we told you that it is bad. But in the end of the day, in the worst scenario that we lose the support of these women, we told you that first it will not happen because we are universal and people have their high relatability, but second, it will not separate them. They will not separate themselves to us, and they will not stop supporting us, because universal means universal cause unity, the voices and the friendly approach acceptable. But we are also powerful in terms of political discussion and process of policy, and we are their only safety net to, for example, having the protection instead of status quo. And that is why even in very worst scenario we use this approach and they separate themselves, it will not happen, because we are the only powerful entity of political movement that they have instead of status quo. Thank you.
Mulai Kak. Feminist movement is the only exclusive movement organization that can support them. Why? Because they want to shift the equality, which why the equality is only exists under this movement of the organization, because they all the women inside of this organization understand there is a variety during this entire time. They feel the same background of offended they feel in many contexts, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why we think that even if the government side of the house thinks that there's religions and also other organization movement that will try to support them, we think that it's we think that, however, it's still not their main agenda to reach their equality. We believe that each of these organizations also have their main focus to be reached to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why we think that by universal these kinds of things that they say so it can make them easier to understand the woman problem. We think that it's not strategic ways to also to cater these kinds of people, because we believe that because in our side we also want to portray how complex their problem. So that is why we as my prime minister as my leader of opposition had already told you that we want to expand more the public support and also funding and also creating a better policy for their right, ladies and gentlemen. Before going to my substantive, one independent rebuttal for the government side of the house. They say that these kinds of marginalized group don't need to be funded because the value that they support is very irrelevant. So that is why your voice that you try to support in a parliament will not be significant. But ladies and gentlemen, no matter how irrelevant it is, we believe that as a society we still should to support these kinds of movement. At the very least, these kinds of people will secure to be adaptive in their environment, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why they still need to be prioritized. If the case is about the religion, they become LGBT and so on and so forth. We believe that the engagement is still will not be significant if you not try to allocation your funding to support them. To begin with, ladies and gentlemen, the engagement because to begin with, their engagement in society, there's something that taking there is their right they're taking by the society that exists, ladies and gentlemen. For example, even if as LGBT in a religion organization, for example, you still need to be supported at the very least. Even if your demand to having a same-sex legal marriage is not supported, at very least your other identity, for example, your freedom to have clothes that men using a woman clothes, at very least can still be supported even in a very conservative area, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why we think that these kinds of public support still need to be championed in this debate, ladies and gentlemen. So before first clashes that's talking about the public support, which side that will give the better public support to this marginalized group. They say that it will not create a better public support because the movement that you will exist in your side, you will justify the radical movement inside of this inside of the segmentation of feminist movement organization, ladies and gentlemen. But we think that one point of clarification: the radical that happen in their side is exists because they have no option to do, ladies and gentlemen. In our side, these kinds of allocation, allocation funding will give you another option to be support to pursue, ladies and gentlemen, because and also we believe that this radical movement is not that feasible to be happen because to begin with, actually they have the same problem, but the problem is that they have a different social culture and also region, ladies and gentlemen. So their problem, even if it looks same, but it's very contextual towards to the particular area, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why we think that the direct impact that they mean is not clear on how they make it too simplistic. They cannot explain to us why it can cater the very contextual problem in a particular country. For example, that exists is that there exists that the domestic violence that happened in India. The reason why the Gulabi gang is in there is very exists to murder people, to directly going to the field and killing husband that who do the domestic violence, because they have no option. So that is why any kinds of these kinds of things they do. But when we try to giving this funding allocation, we think that these kinds of radical things will not be happen, ladies and gentlemen. These kinds of things also happen because government are carelessly follow up the regulation and giving the sanction to the people that do the domestic violence, ladies and gentlemen. So this also to break down their argument that the government effort that exists is still not enough in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Why this Gulabi gang is doing like that? Because they have no funding, they have no any kinds of structural campaign, they have no voice in the political discourse. So we think that it's so all they think is that as long as make them feel secure, as them they feel protected, as long they not feeling fear of being marginalized, they will do any kinds of things, even it's become a criminal things, ladies and gentlemen, which we don't support in these kinds of things, because we believe that as a feminist movement group, in our side, when you're being prioritized, you get allocation funding and so on and so forth, there will be more massive of raise the issue of your problem. You will get attention. It will create more awareness and spread more empathy to all the people. So that is why forwarding this cause will naturalize the conditions and people will not try to be that radical to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why this public support also going to the discussion in a parliament, ladies. Going to the parliament, which going to my second clashes, whether will giving the better solution for them, ladies and gentlemen. This and giving the better protection for them, ladies and gentlemen. They say that in our side it will not create a better protection, because in our side the voice that they will throw in a parliament will not be here, will less support, because less of people can engage, ladies and gentlemen. We said no because in a parliament itself there will be always feminist movement that will exist in there to support any kinds of value that you try to bring in a parliament, ladies and gentlemen. Since they are prioritized, since they get concern from the society, and also the previous public support that have been glamorized by their movement will be here, ladies and gentlemen. More people will be engaged, more people will try to understand, to put their empathy how if they become like that, for example. Ladies and gentlemen, through this legal allocation budget and also to the policy will defend them to having a sustainability protection, ladies and gentlemen. They will have a strategic campaign, advertisement through the media, socialization, political agenda for their candidate to support their campaign. It will continuously, it needs continuously to be funding, because if not, it will less exposure in the society and the value will not be put in mind by the society. And also we think that it's also important to be sustainable, is also to avoid the same cases not to be happen, because ladies and gentlemen, the problem that also exists from the feminist movement itself, it also create victim. The government also have to subsidize their severity, for example. The government have to give them health care and so on and so forth, trusting and etc. We believe that through this kind of policy and also funding, this policy that exists will try to defend them sustainability in the future to prevent this kinds of thing not to be happen again. So that is why we think it's the only exclusive proposal to be reached. Thank you.
Panels, just because we prioritize marginalized group of women doesn't mean we neglect the rest of the members of the feminist movement, ladies and gentlemen. As good movement, we want to help those who need help first, those who suffer. We want to prioritize them, and that stance of the opposite side of the house stands till the end of the debate. We explained to you in the status quo the equal distribution of supports towards the all feminist movement members, and in the status quo, the equal distribution of support towards feminist movement is happening. Yet there are still group of women that still suffer. It proves to you that actually equal distributions is not good. So in this debate, in this debate, I have several cases that I got from this debate. Is the first which side of the house that can receive more of public support, and second of all, whether or not we should prioritize the marginalized group of women. First of all, the equality to all women actually happen in the opposition. Can exclusively happen in the opposition side of the house because all speakers of the opposition side of the house has explained that we want to focus more. To achieve that equality, we want to focus more on the marginalized group of women and second of group of women, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Public support. We explain to you why the feminist movement is lack of public support, and how the proposal of opposition side of the house will gain public support because we setting specific goals, which is to help those who need first, and also we have standard to achieve. It's different with the government side of the house, where those standards are not exist. We have explained to you why we should prioritize the marginalized group of women, because the urgency is stronger in their the urgency is stronger in their group. And also we also think about the future implications that will happen if we prioritize the marginalized group of women. We have explained to you, the feminist movement, if successfully fight for their rights, this marginalized group of women will be more contributive towards feminist agenda, and so on and so forth. All allocation of money will happen. Allocation of money will be happen and support our proposal, because the parliament finally acknowledged on what the feminist movement fight for. The parliament will help, because they know the money where the money will because they know where the money will go. For example, it's different in their side when there is no specific goals that set in their proposal, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that the mechanism that we have brought to you, with first allocation, with funding, allocation of money, and second of all, the campaigning house for marginalized women will success at the end of the day. So based on these reasons, opposition stands.
Ladies and gentlemen, opposition want to win this debate by embrace equality but reject to help equal distribution for women. It's something that sounds like impossible, right? Because in order for you to embrace those kinds of equality, that means that you have to embrace the women by equal distribution and equal approach to all the women in this world, ladies and gentlemen. Judges, opposition must be excluded from this debate because they are unable to understand what is exactly the problem that happened in status quo. As the government, we concede that we face that such intersectional problem, such as how the black and white women that face currently, but these debates should focus and discuss about which side that could explain about the effectivity on achieve the feminist movement agenda, ladies and gentlemen. And also, opposition side of the house dismissive to our side that we already proved to you that Haykal told you and explained to you we are going to be beneficial in terms of how we embrace the social and political access to these kinds of women at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. In comparative with opposition side of the house, that two that they say that the feminist movement should cater everything without considering how the limitation exists at the very first beginning, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we say that all their points about how it could be beneficial for women is not going to happen in their side of the house, ladies and gentlemen. So clashes, which side that provide better alternative for feminist movement to embrace their equality. So the problem in opposition side, or the problem in their side, actually could be solved in our side, right? Opposition also failed in this debate because they are unable to distinguish what do we mean by universal cause and what do we mean by marginalized group, ladies and gentlemen. In government side, in opposition side, the argument that they try to glorify in this debate is that they try to explain about how these kinds of feminist movement must be inclusive at the end of the day. Prime Minister already respond to this argument. We say that this is important to have these kinds of universal cause because it could be effective to the feminist movement, because we want to cater all the women. We want that the only response by the opposition, it's important to embrace the marginalized group without explaining that why these kinds of what they mean by these kinds of marginalized group to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. And also Haykal told you and explain to you how the diverse characteristics of these kinds of feminist movement will lead to an effective to solve the problem that what happened with feminist movement right now, ladies and gentlemen. We explain to you the problem that we must engage is about the social and political access. Even though that Farid told you that the additional the benefit in their side, there will be additional value such as benefit such as funding better in their side of the house. Vira already told you, right, that this is actually, we have to concede that not all the burden of these kinds of women should be catered by these kinds of feminist movement, ladies and gentlemen. And also the argument by the opposition side of the house, they say that the alternative in status quo is not enough. Vira told you and tackle down this point, even if in their side of the house there is no such explanation, then how in their side the protection would be effective, ladies and gentlemen, when you are not having such a bargaining power to begin with. The only response by the opposition side of the house, they have incentive and funding and so on and so forth. But ladies and gentlemen, do not count this point because opposition side of the house never explained to you where these kinds of funding come from, where is the source of these kinds of funding to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. Even though they try to explain about this funding would come by the government, we say that it's less likely to effectively happen in our side, because in the government they have to control a lot of things, ladies and gentlemen, and they have no time to focus in the problem of feminist movement itself, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, if they say that these kinds of funding coming from the feminist movement, we say that that is not going to happen, because even feminist movement right now have less of funding to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we proud to propose. Thank you.